Hey UND community, it's Sonia and we're back today making Naan Flatbread pizza. This meal is really awesome. You can eat it for either lunch or dinner. If you're like me, you like to make enough to have for both. So I tend to make enough to have for dinner that night and then for lunch the following day. It's really quick, so it's cheap, it's fast, and it's healthy. The nice thing about this meal is that you can add and kind of make it your own. It's very flexible. So I will be using a few different vegetables today, different ingredients, which I'll talk you through in just a little bit, but please feel free to add or maybe take away some of the items that I'm putting on if you don't like it and swap them out for items that you personally like on your own. So before we get started, I am going to take you through and kind of show you what we're using, and I'm also going to go ahead and preheat the oven to 350 degrees. This is us preheating our oven. So taking you through some of our ingredients, we're going to be using a cookie sheet, which is where we're going to actually make the pizza, assemble it, and then bake it. And then fun tip or fun fact, I always like to put a piece of parchment paper down. This just helps with cleanup, so that way if like cheese or vegetables spill over, you don't end up with a sticky mess on the pan. It ends up on the parchment paper, which you can just remove and then wash the pan off very quickly, very easily, so it helps with quick cleanup. Then over here we have our naan flatbread. This one's actually flavored. It's non-roasted garlic flatbread. So that's just nice if you like a little flavor, but you don't know how to add it in and you don't want to use like olive oils or butters that are flavored. I personally, when I like to make these, aim to find the whole wheat individual naan flatbreads, but during a time of social distancing and people buying out a lot of the grocery store, you got to work with what you have, and that's the non-roasted garlic flatbread, which tastes delicious. Then I have some baby spinach that's already been washed and ready to go. I always like getting a container like this, and you can use the spinach for a variety of different ingredients or recipes. And then I have some mozzarella cheese, which is shredded. This in essence is gonna be the base of our pizza. I have some Kalamata olives, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. And then I have cherry tomatoes. As you can see, I've already pre-measured out both the tomatoes and the olives. We'll discuss that in a bit. And then I have some fresh mozzarella for our topping. Okay, so good practice before you begin cooking is just to wash your hands. I think you've all by now heard that you should wash your hands with warm soapy water for about 20 seconds, singing the ABCs or happy birthday. I already went through and did that. This is good practice whether we are in the middle of COVID-19 or whether you're just preparing food or about to eat on any regular day. One thing that I like to emphasize is please make sure that you really scrub underneath the fingernails and around the wrists. That's one area that most people tend to neglect when they are washing their hands. We tend to just get the main surface of our hands, like our palms and the base of our fingers, but really underneath the nails and the wrists. If you've ever done a glow germ activity where they show you like, oh, you forgot to wash here, that's a really, that's an awakening or a rude awakening to see, wow, I really neglected to wash around those areas. I need to focus on really scrubbing that. All right, so I went ahead and took our naan and I put it down on our cookie sheet. I always like to put this top, it's kind of more of like the bubbly part down first so that you really have a flat surface to work with. So you can see it right here. And then as I mentioned earlier, I like to use the cheese as my base. I'm not really a big sauce person, but for people that are, you can definitely put some tomato sauce down. You could use pesto if you wanted to as a base. It's really up to you. So I have about a 1/4 cup in here. I'm actually doubling this, so this is actually more like a bit of a half. It's a little bit over a 1/4. We're gonna say it's about a 1/3. And I'm using mozzarella for this. If you want to make it a lower fat, a lower calorie option, you can definitely use reduced fat mozzarella cheese. It's really what you decide to make it. If you don't want to use mozzarella cheese, that's completely fine too. I made this pizza before using cheddar cheese just because that's what I had in the refrigerator, and it came out just fine. All right. So I also am personally a huge cheese fan. If you are lactose intolerant, you can use a dairy-free alternative cheese. And for all my gluten-free or celiac intolerant friends, you can also make this pizza on a cauliflower crust, and it tastes really awesome. It tastes really great. I can show you a recipe later on where we actually use the cauliflower crust. All right, so my pizza basically has its base. I use the cheese as the glue. A lot of people feel like cheese has a bad rap in society, kind of depending on who you talk to. They feel that it's a fattier option. It is definitely like fattier. It's a fattier protein compared to things like chicken, but it actually has it has 7 grams of protein per serving. And so that's a pretty nice, it's a nice grab and go snack. So if you ever think of cheese sticks, this is just the shredded version of it. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, so for those of you that are looking at this naan and you're thinking, wow, that is a big piece of naan, that's gonna serve one person. This actually serves 2. And so what I do is after I cook it, I just cut it down in half, and I eat half for dinner, and then I take half for lunch the next day. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put down about a cup of spinach. And so I had pre-measured a half cup out, and then I'll grab another half cup to spread around. I always say that you can go ahead and add more vegetables. So, I mean, don't feel obligated to measure out exactly a half cup. You can definitely double it and use more. I am a huge fan of spinach. I like sneaking it in wherever I can. Spinach kind of has a blandish flavor on its own, if you ask me. So it tends to pick up and absorb the flavor of things around it, but it falls in the dark green leafy vegetable category. And so it's high in antioxidants, and it's a good source of iron. All right, so I have a cup, and everything for this, because it's one big piece of pizza, everything for this is truly being doubled, because then we'll just cut it in half the long way. All right, so you can see the spinach is on here. One thing I do want to talk about is a lot of people see a container of spinach this size and they think that that's too much spinach. They would never eat it all on their own, or that it would go bad before they could finish eating it. Spinach is a pretty hardy green leafy vegetable, so it actually lasts for a really long time. I also like to actually put it in Ziploc freezer bags and freeze it later on. So if I know that I'm not going to have as many salads that week, or if I'm not going to make something that uses it, I'll put it in the freezer, and then I'll just take it out later and I'll put it on pizza. I'll dump it in some smoothies, or you can even put it in soup. And so the other thing about spinach is this might look like it's very bulky right now, but once it goes in the oven, the heat really shrinks it up. It shrivels while it's in the oven. So here's the start of our pizza. I'm gonna go ahead and push it over to the side and show you our tomatoes. Okay, so on our cutting board over here, the oven just went off, so preheating is done. On our cutting board over here, I have some tomatoes and some olives. I'm gonna go ahead and push the olives over to the side. I already began to cut a few of our tomatoes. These are called Constellation tomatoes, and I actually just bought them at Walmart. Constellation tomatoes are just small cherry tomatoes, but they're different forms. So you have your yellow, I did have some orange tomatoes in here, heirloom tomatoes, and then look, here's a red tomato. So I went ahead and I have pre-cut these, and we'll add them on top of the pizza. But just to show you how you should go ahead and cut your tomato, I like to cut it in half. If you wanted to leave it whole, by all means go for it. It rolls off, so having it in half allows it to stay better. But if you can kind of see the little tip right there, I always find that, and then just slice it down the middle. And so I'm going to do that with the remainder of our cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes are a really good source of lycopene, but even more importantly, what a lot of people don't know that they are high in is vitamin C. And so vitamin C, it boosts immunity, which is something we could all use, whether we are in the middle of a major pandemic, or whether you're just kind of during the regular school year, during cold and flu season. Immunity boosting is always beneficial. So just another thing to know about these tomatoes, I actually went through, and when you buy them, you just buy them in the container. I went through and pre-washed them in a colander, so just dump it in there and then rinse them off. This helps remove any excess debris like dirt, dust. You also don't know who's been touching the produce before you. Even though it is in a container that's sealed, people can get into it if they wanted to. And so just, it's good practice to get into the habit of washing your produce, especially if it has not been pre-washed on its own. All right, so I am going to go ahead and add our tomatoes on top of the pizza. You just kind of want to space them out. You could also use Roma tomatoes if you wanted to. You could use what they call big fat boy tomatoes. If you grow tomatoes in your garden during the summer, I really recommend using those. They're nice, fresh, they smell fresh. Tomatoes on your pizza. The reason I like the Constellation tomatoes is because you do get about 3 different varieties of tomatoes in there, 3 different types. And so they all have a slightly different flavor. For example, I personally find that the orange tomatoes are gonna be, orange or yellow are gonna be your sweetest, compared to the mini heirloom tomatoes. Those don't have as sweet a flavor. They're not bitter. I wouldn't know how exactly to describe their flavor, but they don't have that nice sweet, just like plain snack, like you could eat it on its own taste. So that's the other thing about tomatoes. You can use them in a variety of different recipes. Basically everything that we're using for this meal could be used in something else, so it's not just limited to here I have to use this only for pizza. You can use tomatoes in salad, you can put them in soups, you can eat them on their own as a snack or with hummus. You can basically use this anywhere. Tomatoes are something else, kind of like the spinach, that I feel, yes, you could measure it out, but also feel free to just put on as much as you'd like. All right, so our pizza's looking pretty good right now. All right, earlier I told you that we were gonna use Scaramata olives. And so I just got this container at Target. It's really nice because the serving size is 4 and it serves about 12 people per container. So it really does go a long way. Fun fact, I personally like to buy olives that are in a jar, that are in the brine. I like them better than canned olives, but if that's what you like and that's what you prefer, by all means, go ahead and use it. I'm Greek, so I am definitely partial to Karamata olives, but if you have a different brand of olives that you like on pizza, go for it. Okay, so I told you serving size is 4 olives, so I have I actually have exactly 8 olives here. I went ahead and bought olives that were already pitted, and so just as a close-up, you can see it has been pitted. That being said, you might find a pit periodically in there, and that's not a big deal. I'm gonna go ahead and actually slice it in half, so that way, again, they don't roll off when they're on the pizza. One thing about cutting, so a lot of people feel that a sharp knife is dangerous. That's a myth. In reality, a sharp knife is actually beneficial to use when you're in the kitchen because you don't need to apply as much pressure to cut through your ingredient or your produce or meat if you are using it. So The other thing when you are cutting, sorry, that one got a little tricky. When you are cutting, you don't want to claw at whatever you're cutting. You want to almost form a nice flat base with this part of your hand and your fingers. So that way if the knife were to slip, it would just slide down rather than provide a spot to cause damage. Okay, so our olives are cut in half. We're gonna bring this back over and we're gonna put them down. So Kalamata olives, well, they're from Kalamata. A lot of the world's olive oil is actually produced in Kalamata. Kalamata is located in the Peloponnese region of Greece, and that's basically what they're known for, their olives and their olive oil. So in order to make olive oil, this is what gets pressed. One olive gets pressed, or actually several olives get pressed in order to make olive oil. So next time you're at the grocery store and you're buying your olive oil, look to see where it's from. I really recommend, for those of you that have ever been in my classes before, you've heard me say this, but I recommend buying extra virgin olive oil because it's the first press of olive oil. Anything after that is really them just squeezing the olives over and over again, but your extra virgin is going to be your most nutrient dense olive oil. All right, so this is what our pizza is looking like. And then last but not least, I mentioned, or I have a stick of mozzarella cheese, and this is different. I always like to get a little bit of fresh cheese rather than just having shredded cheese. While shredded cheese is great, and if that's what you have, go for it. But this has a bit of a different flavor. Sometimes shredded cheese does have that powdery texture, which is kind of used to help preserve it and keep it from all sticking together. But this is fresh mozzarella. So I'm gonna go ahead and just slice off two slices. The cheese is actually, you can't really see it, but it's kind of pre-marked, so that way you know exactly what constitutes a slice or a serving. Again, if we were using an individual piece of naan, I would only use one per piece per naan, but since we're using two, or one big one, which is the equivalent of 2 individual naans, I'm gonna use 2 slices of cheese. And then this you can just kind of shred on its own and place it down here. Compared to some cheeses, mozzarella is actually a leaner option. Fresh mozzarella, mozzarella initially, like most cheese, it is Italian in nature. But you can see with fresh mozzarella and good mozzarella that it has a nice, like, very white color to it. Mine might look a little, depending on my lighting, it might have a bit of a different hue. Okay. And so we are almost done. I'm shredding the last piece of cheese on top of it. Once you finish shredding or kind of spreading out the cheese, you're gonna go ahead and place this in the oven until the cheese is melted and the crust looks like a nice golden brown toasted color. That is about 10 to 15 minutes, so I will come back in 10 to 15 minutes and show you our finished product. So I'm gonna go ahead and place this in the oven. Again, this is what our finished product, a bunch of it rolled off. This is what our finished product is looking like, and I'll show you what it looks like when we've actually finished cooking it. All right, see you in a bit, bye.